Good morning, everyone, and happy Saturday. I'm Dr. Jolene Brighton, and we are going to chat about coming off of birth control. And so I want to just remind you, I talk all about this in Beyond the Pill, which is my book. And so as you're coming on, I want you to say hello, let me know where you're from. We're going to talk about coming off of birth control. Very interesting thing. So I am currently in Hollywood, California, and I was at a event yesterday. It was Nanagana's manifesto for Women's International Day. And I was speaking on the topic of, a lot of things actually. I was talking about intuition, talking about birth control, talking about hormones, and that entire room of women had some kind of story around hormonal birth control. And it's very interesting to me how often doctors will say post-birth control syndrome isn't real, or that birth control doesn't have any of these long-term side effects or consequences that you say. And yet, whenever I am somewhere speaking with women, it's like as soon as I tell women what I do, what my book is about, they start telling their pill story, or they start telling their depot story, or their IUD story. And so it's really common. It's very common for women to have trouble transitioning off of hormonal birth control. And it's equally as common to have a doctor say, it's all in your head, or your body's always been broken, or my favorite is, this is the new normal. Like, what is that? Like, just because it's common for women to have this experience doesn't make it the new normal. And I actually was speaking with a woman last night who said to me, when she came off of birth control and she lost her period, that her doctor was like, yeah, that happens, and you probably aren't going to get it back. And then the reproductive endocrinologist said you have premature ovarian failure, which this was a while ago. We now call that primary ovarian insufficiency. So we changed the name on that because some women spontaneously recover their periods. But it's just very interesting to me that she was like, why didn't my doctor tell me that? He acted like, oh yeah, this is something I've seen before. Yeah, you might not ever get your period back. She's like, but he never told me that before I started birth control. So let's talk a bit about post-birth control syndrome. Let's talk about why is it so difficult to come off of birth control, and why is it so difficult to get a doctor to listen? Okay, so first things first. Hormonal birth control was developed to impact only the reproductive system, right? Its entire design was to keep you from getting pregnant. And it can work in several ways. So one is, it can shut down brain-ovarian communication. It can change your cervical mucus. So your fertile cervical mucus is like a superhighway for sperm. Sperm can fast track to the egg. And with that, if it gets altered, then sperm can't really swim. Now, the other thing it can do is thin or change the uterine lining. It can also make the uterus actually really hostile, so that even if you do become pregnant, then a baby wouldn't want to implant or couldn't implant there. So that's like the several mechanisms of ways that different hormonal contraceptives work. So now, by design, they're supposed to impact the reproductive system. But as we see in the research, and yes, if you are a practitioner listening, you can jump on PubMed and it all lives there. And whenever doctors are like, there's no evidence for this post-birth control syndrome business, I'm like, look, just because someone didn't say that exact phrase in the research doesn't change the fact that the research does show us that hormonal birth control can induce leaky gut, what is known in medicine as intestinal hyperpermeability. The lay term is leaky gut. We also know it impacts microbial diversity. So you've got to have good gut bugs, and you got to have the right amount. Otherwise, you find yourself in a whole lot of trouble, especially with metabolizing estrogen. It can impact mood. We're learning so much more about the microbiome every day. That's just the gut. But what about the fact that hormonal birth control bogs down your liver detox pathways and depletes nutrients that you need to run like every function in your body? So things like magnesium and selenium. So magnesium is involved in so many things. Selenium, I mean, that's going to impact your thyroid. It's going to impact your glutathione. Glutathione's the mama of all antioxidants. She keeps your ovaries, your brain healthy, and prevents gray hair. So everybody loves that, right? And in addition to that, hormonal birth control, it does impact the brain. And so there's been studies that show that it can cause changes on brain scans. The female brain is different when it is on progestin. So understand, I get the question all the time, especially about Beyond the Pill or my program, the Birth Control Hormone Reset program. Is this just about the pill? Like, I have an IUD, so I'm fine, right? Or I got a depot shot, so I'm fine, right? Like, no. So understand this. We used to think estrogen was like the big bad wolf of the scenario, like a synthetic estrogen, like knocking everybody's house down. If you think of your systems like houses, but in reality, progestin actually is a big troublemaker. And the progestin-only contraceptives, they are correlated with higher incidence of depression than the combination pill. So IUDs don't fare better. Depot doesn't fare better. Like, there is no, and so understand that it's called Beyond the Pill to give you root cause solutions to your hormones beyond birth control and to give you life beyond the pill. But it's not just like, we talk a lot about the pill because she was the very first contraceptive that, hormonal contraceptive that stepped on the scene. We have the most research about it. However, the same progestin that's going into the pill, these progestins are going into your other contraceptives. So all hormonal contraceptives can lead to post-birth control syndrome and can cause you some trouble when you decide to get off. So we are talking about coming off of hormonal birth control. We talked about hormonal birth control impacts every single system in your body. I gave you some examples. We talked about nutrient depletions. We also talked a little bit about post-birth control syndrome, and I alluded to some of those symptoms. Now, post-birth control syndrome, as I've defined it in Beyond the Pill, is the collection of signs and symptoms that arise about 3 months is on when women will probably start to notice things, but it's really like 4 to 6 months later when they really take notice of things. And it can come on much sooner and it can come on later. And when it comes on later, understand this, I talk to women and it's like, oh no, I had symptoms, but I dealt with it. So sometimes it's years later that women start having issues and they're like, okay, I can't handle this anymore. Now I go to my doctor. So that brings us to why it gets so tricky to get a doctor to recognize that maybe birth control impacted you. So one is their belief is because they were taught by their continuing education, by medical school, by the pharmaceutical company, that hormonal birth control is a lady part hormone, a lady part medication. It only impacts lady parts. So maybe if you have irregular periods, missing periods, vaginal infections, pain with intercourse, inability to orgasm or pain with orgasm, your doctor might say, yeah, that could be birth control. But odds are when you come off, they'll probably be like, nope, that's you. And you can let me know in the comments if that's ever been you, where a doctor's like, yeah, no, I just think it's you. Like it's you. And this is your new normal. And what you're experiencing, you just probably need to stress less. Like, stop stressing so much. And stress is real. Like, stress definitely makes us sick, but like that's not always the answer. So here's the deal. With coming off of hormonal birth control, if your doctor believes that it only impacts your reproductive system, then when you start having symptoms like gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, new onset of migraines, headaches, acne, cystic acne, psoriasis. So I actually was talking to someone last night who stopped hormonal birth control and their entire body broke out with psoriasis. That is like the second time this week that someone has told me that story of breaking out with psoriasis, which is an autoimmune disease, which is like kind of a trip. Then I'm like, whoa, twice in 1 week, somebody had this same experience and they both had the same story. My doctor said it had nothing to do with birth control. And in fact, my doctor encouraged me to get back on birth control. This is why I love what I do. I get to do the root cause stuff. And your doctor's not bad, but understand that like they think hormonal birth control only impacts your reproductive system. So if you present with symptoms outside of that, they're not likely to make that connection on their own. Now, the other issue is that when we are talking about post-birth control syndrome, it can take some time to show up because your body is really resilient. Now, sometimes you'll just not have a period come back altogether. And if you don't want to have a baby, a doctor's solution is often to get right back on hormonal birth control, which is like such a disservice. You should be investigating that. And whether or not you want to procreate, that really has no bearing on like, should you be healthy or not? Like, that's something that really gets me, is like, oh, so if you want to have a baby, we're going to get concerned and we're going to actually investigate and we're going to try to help you. But if you don't want to have a baby, then just go on birth control and go on your way. Like, what is that bias about? It's so bizarre. So with that, being on hormonal birth control, coming off of it, it impacts so many systems and it can take a while to show up. That sometimes women start having symptoms like 3 months in, then 9 months in, it's getting worse. Then 18 months later, they can't handle it. Then they go to their doctor. And then their doctor says, well, if it was hormonal birth control, it would have presented by now. Like, it would have come up as soon as you stopped. Except that, like, we have to recognize that the body's resilient and her timeline. Then if you actually spend the time to ask the patient about that, she often had symptoms leading up to it. It's not like we don't really wake up with symptoms. Like, there are very few conditions where it's like you go to bed and you wake up and now you have the full-blown condition, you have symptoms. It's always a little creep and crawl coming in. So with hormonal birth control, I see some questions coming in. I'm going to say a few more things, then I want to answer some of these questions here. So with hormonal birth control, and when you come off, what should you consider? So this is one of the biggest questions I get. I talk about it in hormonal birth control. My program, the Birth Control Hormone Reset program, I take you through this every single day for 5 weeks on how to do this. Now, if you got on hormonal birth control like the almost 60% of women who got on it because they have symptoms and they wanted to manage them, give yourself some prep time. Like, the biggest thing that I've seen in my patients and in women I've spoken with is that those who don't struggle, they dial in their diet. They start eating way more vegetables. They get high quality protein going. They have healthy fats. Then they actually bring in, exercise and lifestyle therapies and really are supporting their body before they make that transition. And they have way less issues than the women like myself who just went cold turkey and was like, oh, I'm banana stressed out in medical school and I'm going to stop hormonal birth control. And yes, I was eating all my vegetables, but it's also a situation that know that, like, even if you are doing everything right, you can still have post-birth control syndrome. And in Beyond the Pill, I actually help you fine tune it. There's quizzes in the book to help you understand and navigate your hormone imbalance. This book is not about just birth control. It's about how to take back your hormones and how to balance your hormones naturally, because that's the biggest reason we end up on hormonal birth control. And that's why you guys have said, so many of you have written me and said, like, you should have called this the Hormone Bible. I shared that yesterday with people and I was like, I can't even say that with a straight face. Like, I don't think that was the right title for it. But with that, you want to prep if you're going to come off. And I show you how to do that in the book. Now, if you got on hormonal birth control, like Carla, who's asking a question right now and saying that, yeah, every time her doctor basically gaslights her about her symptoms, if you're on it for contraceptive reasons and you want to transition off, what I generally tell women is, like, start supporting your body when you get to the end of the pill pack and the depot shot is wearing off, then jump into the Brighton protocol. And so you can really start, like, the protocol that's in here at any time. It works for so many hormonal conditions, including post-birth control syndrome, including, polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's helpful with endometriosis. And, I should say PCOS and endometriosis, they have hormonal issues with that condition, but they are not rooted in hormonal imbalance. Their root cause is very different than the root cause of, like, just coming off of hormonal birth control. So with that, few things I want to say. One is, we've talked about the diet. The other thing is paying attention to your circadian rhythm. So making sure your light-dark cycle is guarded. So wear your amber glasses. In the evening. Mine are sitting here. And make sure that you're sleeping in a completely dark room. When you wake up, expose yourself to sunlight. We, as women, very, very tuned in to the light-dark cycle. And that is something that's really important. There's been research back in the 1970s showing that if you exposed women to light, so excess artificial light, that you could actually mess with their ovulation and mess with their whole menstrual cycle. So that's a very important part of our hormonal health. And I just want to make sure that, we talk a lot about diet. We talk a lot about, stress reduction. We talk a lot about nutrient depletions. And so if you are on hormonal birth control, you need to be taking a multivitamin or prenatal because you are depleting nutrients. You have to make sure you replenish nutrient stores. You can't out diet the depletions happening with hormonal birth control. Just like you can't out diet the depletions happening with metformin. You can't out diet the depletions happening with a statin. Like the depletions that medications cause have to be replaced with a supplement because you need that higher dose form. And this is well accepted conventionally as well. So making sure that while you're on hormonal birth control, and believe me, and Beyond the Pill have got you, if you're on hormonal birth control, support your body now. And then when you're ready to make that transition, it will be so much easier. So Carla was asking, why get off birth control? I mean, if you don't want to get pregnant, right? So if you don't want to get pregnant, just know chapter 13 of Beyond the Pill goes through non-hormonal contraceptive options. So there are other options out there. If you're on hormonal birth control, I really encourage you, pick up the book, read through it, identify, are you having any of the side effects? Are you having any issues? Know what lab testing to get. So why would we want to consider getting off of birth control? As you guys know, I'm not anti-birth control. I'm all about the individual understanding what's happening in her body. But let's say you have a factor V mutation. Let's say you have an MTHFR gene mutation. You're at much higher risk for stroke and heart attack. That's just like a no deal. Like you can't be on hormonal birth control if that's what's going, if you have those genes. Like it's just like, it's playing Russian roulette, quite frankly. So with that, the other thing to consider is if you have thyroid disease, autoimmune disease, if you have a family history of autoimmune disease, especially Crohn's, 5 years on the pill is a 300% increased risk of developing Crohn's disease if you have a family history of it. So there's a lot of considerations of why you might want to come off of birth control. And if you do ever want to have a baby in the future, it's better to come off sooner than later, because for some women, it can take, and the research has said, it can take a good 18 months for you to start ovulating again. So let's say you're 38 and you're like, I want to have a baby, but like, not yet. I'm going to like wait 6 months and then I'll come off because my doctor said, boom, you'll just get pregnant right away. That very rarely happens. Like we all know the girlfriend who like got pregnant, but we know way more girlfriends who come off of hormonal birth control and are like, I was moody, I was anxious, I couldn't sleep, I was having hot flashes or night sweats, like my vagina became very dry, I was, having breast tenderness, PMS symptoms, like cystic acne, all those kinds of things. So there's a lot of considerations of why you would want to come off birth control. And really it's a medication. Have a discussion with your prescribing provider who's a licensed medical professional trained in pharmacology to be able to understand your risk. And you can take what is in Beyond the Pill and actually, share that with your provider and say, hey, like I'd like to, I would like to get like this lab test done, for instance, to evaluate my thyroid. So Carla, I hope that helps. I'm going to write that in there. I'm going to take a few questions here. So I wanted to just talk about, some things to consider with coming off the pill, post-birth control syndrome, why it can be hard to get your doctor to recognize what is going on and to give you some tips about what to do about it. If you need more support, like I want to encourage you to grab Beyond the Pill, read up on it. It takes a deep dive into the research. And if you're someone who really wants like the practical how-to, you're going to get it in the book. But I will say I made a companion program because a lot of us, we need more support. And, you can grab the book. There's lots of women doing the protocol in the book. They're going through the program. They're getting great results. And then there's women who are reaching out to me saying, I just need to like someone to hold my hand every single day and know where I'm at. And that's what I did with the birth control hormone reset program. Is I actually designed this program. So how it went, how everything happened with the book is that I developed the protocols in my clinic, one-on-one with women. Then we put it into an online program and we tested that. And then we distilled it down and put what we could in a book in terms of like what would translate really well to a book. And something I can't do in a book is email you every single day for 5 weeks and be like, this is where you should be at, this is what you should be working on, or give you a community to come into of women who are just like you. So Beyond the Pill has a companion program, which is the birth control hormone reset program. And with that, you're going to get even more meal plans. There's challenges we'll take you through, so 5-day challenges so that you can test things for you and not feel like so overwhelmed, like you're making all these drastic changes, that you're changing little by little to get improvement. So I hope that helps for you, all of you who have been emailing and messaging me and saying like, I love the book. It's super helpful, but I'm somebody who needs just a little more support. There's no shame in that. Most people need a little more support. And in the program, I don't go as deep into the science and all of that. I don't give you charts and everything on lab testing for you to go to the doctor. And so, they're really meant to be used together. So there's so many people coming on. I'm simultaneously on YouTube and Instagram Live. So if you guys have questions about hormonal birth control, post-birth control syndrome, coming off of hormonal birth control, let me know. I'm happy to answer those. And, big thing that I want to say is make sure that you advocate for yourself. Make sure that you are supporting your body in the way that it needs, but also advocating to yourself with your medical professional so that if your doctor says to you, your symptoms are not real, or, this is in your head, or just get back on birth control, why are you even questioning this? That you should really, consider getting a second opinion, because you're the only one who lives in your body. So you're the only one that knows what normal is. So I really hope this has been helpful. I am going to say goodbye to all my YouTube people. Thank you for joining me this morning, and be sure to check out the rest of the videos on my channel, where we talk about birth control, how to balance hormones naturally. We talk about all kinds of things on my channel. And always leave me a comment and let me know what you would like to see a video on, and I'd be happy to provide that. All right.